Hello, I'm editor of Strand Publishing, and we have an event on Saturday, the 23rd in Grantham. It's our third pop-up book signing, and we're going to be showcasing three of our most prolific and prominent authors and screenwriters. And the first one that we want to talk to today is Christopher Chance. So Christopher, can you tell us a little bit about your true crime books and screenplays?
Yes. First of all, regarding screenplays, all of my books are screenplays or adapted from screenplays, or the other way around, if you like. And the first two books were written in prison, and they're the first two books, and they actually culminated the trilogy with Satan's Arena. And the best way to say this is prison writing in the raw, and it's not for children, because I wrote these books from the journals, the daily journals that I kept in the prisons that I was in. And out of that, of course, then came the screenplays. And moving on from the screenplays of prison life, we now have the Assassin's Code 1. And Assassin's Code 1 is a stories that's based on actual events, starting with the massacre, the Munich Games massacre, which then the Mossad made a new branch called Shin Bet, from where the Wrath of God squads came to assassinate all of the Black September people and all the people who were involved in that horrible day at the Olympics. Everybody in the book who's mentioned in the book dies. Sorry, the ones that die actually did die. So that is something that it all actually happened, right from the IRA, ETA, Black September, and our own British Secret Service is all wound up into that tale.
And who's the main protagonist?
Arrowsmith. Arrowsmith is, unlike Ian Fleming's James Bond, where James Bond actually isn't real. It's not all of the things that happen, like subway trains landing in somebody's backyard and all the rest. None of that happens. This is real guns, guts, knives, and martial arts and big adventure all the way around the world, culminating in Ireland, where his quest, if you like, was to become a spy in the middle of international terrorism, and he succeeded, which then comes on to a second book, which I'm working on. After Assassin's Code comes Beneath the Poppy Fields. Now, Beneath the Poppy Fields, I was inspired to write this because on the centenary of the Somme, a few years back, I had a look at it. I was mesmerized by it because I've always got my grandfather's medals, who actually died in that battle. And so then I got into the book because another reason was because it was underground warfare with all the horrors and the claustrophobic. The whole thing is practically unbelievable in real life. It's not been trumpeted about anywhere, really. It was mentioned a little bit in various movies, but this is all about the underground warfare that actually happened. And one of the dirtiest tricks ever was to place a baby in the battlefield. And this was done by the Germans. And obviously a baby in the battlefield caused a lot of people to go to have a look. When they had a look, the bomb that was underneath went off. And these are some of the things, the dirty tricks that happened. And the characters, it's completely character driven, actually. They have all got a part to play, and a very important part to play, all of them. And Johnny Gordon, he's the protagonist, and he made me think about my grandfather. And I put the two together. And anyway, he now lies in Etaples prison in France. Talking about prison so much, cemetery in France.
So are you hoping that somebody might option screenplay for any?
Oh, yes, indeed. I've already got one of the other books optioned, a screenplay optioned. My agent has all of these screenplays, and they're very fortunate. I've got a really good agent in London, and the screenplays, the work itself between book and screenplays is a big challenge. It's an enjoyable challenge, actually, because a screenplay runs normally about 100, 110 pages, 120 pages maximum, whereas a book, you're talking about 300 pages. So because with the screenplay, the camera does all the work. You don't have to explain what colour the wallpaper was and stuff like that, see. So that is kind of the batch of books that I've got. I've got 8 different screenplays, actually, but they also are true crime and based on actual events. Everything I do is based on actual events.
Thank you, Chris. I was just thinking about the people who read your trilogy, Carabanchel trilogy. Very many of them have said, why, from your experience in prison, why have you not got PTSD?
Oh, indeed. I've had many emails from soldiers who I've told them all the same what I did. You write it down, and if you're lucky like me, you can put it together as a book and get published. But the reason for writing it down, you're reliving your bad experiences, but with that repetition, the whole thing becomes therapeutic. I don't mind at all now about talking about some of the really horrible things that happened in the various prisons that I was in. They certainly wouldn't be tolerated in British prisons, the things that happened to me. And you could read all about it in the 3 books, the trilogy itself.
So that, in a way, is a unique selling point for the trilogy, 3 books.
Well, yes, of course, because the writing takes you to places. For instance, the Carabanchel has been demolished, and you will never be able to go and see what goes on in the Carabanchel. But the other prisons, yes, they're still all alive and kicking. And you will have a problem. This is why it's not for children, because it's nightmarish, all of the atrocities that take place between prisoners and staff. Because in my opinion, French and Spanish prison officers have all got a screw loose. Maybe that's why they're called screws, I don't know. But there you go.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on now to Paul. If you could move yourself, please.
Okay. Now unmuted.
Yes, hello. Right, so this is Dr. Paul Hobday, retired GP, and he has written a wonderful, enormous, big book that he's going to tell you about now, the reasons why he decided to write the Deceit Saver.
Yes, thank you, Janie. we all know our NHS is in the news most days, but if you go back to 2010, it rarely featured, and when it did, the stories were fairly positive. Then the NHS was rated as the best healthcare system in the world, with access to doctors being easy and waiting lists short. So have you ever asked yourself the question, why is it now in a state of crisis and meltdown? And how was this allowed to happen? I answer that question in my book called The Deceit Syndrome. You won't get the true reasons from the mainstream media or politicians from the larger parties. They will just bicker over funding, blame doctors and nurses, and claim that the private sector holds the answers. Read The Deceit Syndrome to learn about the neoliberal, 4-decade-old clandestine and deceitful plot to commercialise and Americanise our healthcare. That will make the zealots behind this extremely rich, but cost lives, maybe yours or a member of your family. This is not a conspiracy theory, it is happening. All the evidence is in The Deceit Syndrome from Strand Publishing UK. I wrote it as a dystopian, sometimes humorous thriller, and the reason for writing it was for the book to get a message across to the great British public. It's already nearly too late. Now, proceeds go to campaigns fighting for our NHS, so there's every reason to get a copy and treat yourself to a good but shocking read that will open your eyes to the crime of the century.
Well done, Paul. Yes, indeed. And as an NHS campaigner, I was delighted to receive the manuscript for this book. And we've given an awful lot away, haven't we? People want to read it, they can order it online, buy it, or they can order it through the Central Library at Weatherby's. In fact, all our books. You can ask your local library to request that they send a copy from the Central Library. And people need to read the story about what's happened to our NHS. And the most incredible thing is, I see so much in the book as I was reading it that actually explains what's happening now, because we are entering a dystopian future, in my mind. And the end of your book, it might not be exactly the same, but you talk about needing, that there would be two classes, a working class and an elite, and only the elite would travel. Everybody would be herded into high-rise flats, and they'd need swipe cards to get in anywhere. So sort of ID, similar to what they're thinking of rolling out now, digital ID. And yeah, there was just so much in it. So much in it, even though it's a work of fiction.
Yes, the end justifies the means, in their opinion, and wrote it well before last year's Act, the Healthcare Act, which split the NHS into 42 private-public partnerships that are made they're there for profit making and for the private sector to extract money. And I could predict that, but I didn't know for certain it was going to happen. But it ended up in the book well before it actually did become law.
Yeah, absolutely incredible that you had that foresight, see what was coming down the road, and you were absolutely spot on. Everybody should read this book. Right, thank you very much, Paul. Is there anything else you want to say at this point?
Only that, as you say, on your point, it's a bit like a light bulb moment, something coming on. It was only by putting all the bits together over what's happened in the last 30 or 40 years that you can suddenly realise what the plan is. And then it all makes sense. Once it all makes sense to you, then you've got no doubt of what they're up to. The public may be sceptical when they only know little bits and they hear politicians talking garbage, basically, to deflect you from what is really going on. But you know, if you read the book, you'll be convinced. I'm certain of that.
Yes. We weren't sure what the ending would be, so I think we plumped for an alternative ending as well, didn't we? And even then, we didn't mention a virus, but you had that going through your head, didn't you?
Yeah.
It was just that the book was getting so big. It was so, I had to say, stop, stop, stop.
Yeah.
But are you thinking of writing a sequel, a smaller book, but something to bring us more up to date, or, you know, what would that book look like?
It will be smaller, you'll be relieved to hear. It'll be succinct, and I won't give too much away, but I can probably say what it's based on. And it will have the same sort of theme about healthcare and everything else that goes on in the world, but it's based on something that you might find quite extraordinary, and that is that not the 1945 post-war election was not won by Attlee, it was won by Churchill. And the consequences of that for all of us over the last 60, 70 years will come through in the book. And it's not pretty reading.
Very good. I'm looking forward to getting that manuscript. Just take your time, because I've got plenty on at the moment.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful, Paul. And I do believe you're going to attempt to record it in sections for a radio show called Water Waves. They've requested that you record it because not everybody
Yeah.
has, you know, the time or whatever, you know, all excuses.
Well, since our last conversation about that, the people that are backing it are looking for an actor, which makes me feel better because I wouldn't do a very good job reading it. And the hunt is on to get somebody to actually read it properly. And if we are successful, which the people that are behind it think we will be, because I've got a lot of contacts, then it will be done by a proper actor. And then we'll be able to use it as we wish, because obviously we'll keep the rights for that, to issue it as an audiobook or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. It needs to be on, what is the audiobook app? I've got it somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, it needs to be on that. Yeah, and we can offer that through Strand or whatever online platforms. Very good, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. So moving on now to Mandy. Mandy.
Hi, Jane.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Don't be nervous. Right, Mandy's our newest recruit. We haven't actually signed a contract with Mandy yet, but she brought this book out, the first in a series of 3, and her publisher has let her down. They've said that they're not going to print any more books. And she's a friend of mine. She's a local woman in Grantham, where we're holding our events on Saturday, 10 till 1 on the Green in Grantham, Lincolnshire. And so I've invited Mandy to join us. And because she's been so badly let down by her publisher, I think that we will be bringing out 3 books for her. We're right at the start of that process, but you know, we're big-hearted in Strand, and we like her. So, Mandy, why should every house? Oh, now then, your target audience is young adults, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yeah.
So, does that mean that old adults won't be interested in it?
No, I've had interest from a whole range of age groups, right up to 80s and right down to 14, 13. So yeah, there's an interest from a whole the whole age range.
Okay, so what we want to know, we don't want the story, but
Mhm.
very brief synopsis. And also, weren't we talking about how this book could possibly help young people to find their way through what we're living through today?
Mm.
Extremely stressful for a lot of young people, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's about 4 teenagers, 17-year-olds, and the different scenarios, different situations that they go through. Each one has their own path, but they come together. It starts out where one of the characters loses his adoptive mum, which sends him on a journey, plus his estranged girlfriend, and the 2 other characters come in from that point. There's a second book to this series and a third book that ends the whole thing. What I've actually tried to do in writing it is get into their minds, you know, into kids' minds about how they deal with things, how they deal with different situations, and they are just, for me, they're just a line, shining light, you know, the way kids deal with things, especially with what we're living through at the moment. At the end of the day, they're our future, and my characters come across a whole host of situations, and the way that they deal with it is nothing short of phenomenal. But in writing it, I've tried to get inside their minds and see how they react to different things that are thrown into.
Are you talking about coping strategies?
Yes, absolutely.
People like self-soothing and each other.
Yes, they're all there for each other, you know, at different times and in different ways. There's so many things that go on that they're thrown into, and that carries on through each book, with different characters coming in and others going, you know.
Okay, so that sounds fascinating. I have started to read it, but I haven't got very far into it. But there will be books available on Saturday, won't there? From all
Yes.
from all the authors. You've got some. We've taken. Have you left one in the library in Grantham?
Yes. There are 2 in the library.
Library and one in community books.
Yes.
Meantime, if anybody wants to go and lend or borrow a book rather, and start reading it, they can. If they want to buy one, I think you've got about 12 left or something like that.
Yes, I have. Yes.
And then, so actually, these books will become quite rare because we'll probably change the cover. We might even change the title. We want to distance ourselves in some way from the previous publishers in case they come up.
Absolutely.
But the story essentially will remain the same. And
Yes.
series. It'll be lovely. That's what it'll be. Thank you very much to everybody for your time today. Thank you. I'm just going to stop this recording now.